Greetings. Welcome to another session of the Word in Context. My name is Trevor Maiseri. And today we're going to look at the topic achievements, references, and identity. And we're going to be reading out of the book of 1 Samuel in chapter 17, verses 56 to 58, and in chapter 18, verses 6 to 7. And I'll read 1 Samuel 17, 56 to 58. So the king said, "Inquire whose son this young man is." Then as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" So David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." And jumping on to chapter 18, verses 6 to 7, the Bible reads, "Now it had happened as they were coming home, when David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul, with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. So the women sang, and as they danced, and said, 'Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.'" So what we must realize is that every achievement of your life changes your references. So David has killed Goliath. And we even see Saul approaching David and asking, "Whose son are you, young man?" Remember, this is David that Saul had known for a long time. But because of the achievement, the references change. "Whose son are you, young man?" We also see these women who are singing in the streets and beginning to cheer David much more than they are cheering for King Saul. Because David had achieved by killing Goliath, the references to David had changed. So achievements in our lives always bring about new references. I know there are people that have done their PhDs. We don't call them by name anymore. We call them Dr. So-and-so. It's a new reference. We see people that move into the workplace as fresh graduates. You start by being called by your name. The moment you move into management, you are then called Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so. When you eventually move into executive management, they call you sir or madam. Your references change because of their achievements. We see people that move into ministry. You were an ordinary member of the congregation a few days, a few weeks, a few days, a few months, a few years ago. But now, because you have moved into the pastoral, you are referred to as the pastor. Some are referred to as the apostle or bishops and so forth. It's with every achievement, your references change. But what we must understand is that when references change, they also threaten your identity. You see, references are what people refer to you on the outside, but identity is who you are on the inside. And the greatest threat to your life is when references begin to eat away and overtake your identity. References threaten your identity in three ways. This is because references attract pride, number one. Number two, references bring an aura of self-sufficiency from others, and you feel you don't need others. References can also bring an aura of self-sufficiency from God, and you slowly begin to drift away and feel you don't need God. You can do it on your own. So achievements change your references, and references can threaten your identity. You know, God will give us achievements in our lives here on earth. But today we want to look at the life of David and learn three ways of how to avoid references from threatening our identity. The first lesson is that when references come, you must desperately seek something that humbles you so that you can overcome pride. And if we go back to the scriptures in 1 Samuel chapter 18 in verse 5, the Bible reads, "So David went out wherever Saul sent him and behaved wisely. And Saul sent him over the men of war, and he was accepted in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants." So after David had achieved, by killing Goliath, and all these new references were coming on him, what did he do? He intentionally went to submit to the very king whom he was being exalted over. He goes to save King Saul. He even goes back to save King Saul back in the palace. You see, the extent of David's search for humility in the midst of achievements and referencing was very extreme. Because David goes to seek a place where he can apply humility to the very source of his referencing. Remember, Saul is the source of David's referencing. Because the women are saying David has done more than Saul. And Saul himself asks David, whose son are you? So Saul is the source of David's referencing after his achievements. But when David seeks humility, he doesn't go all over the place. He goes to apply his humility at the source of his referencing, who is Saul. David didn't go to the Philistines to apply humility on a referencing issue that was related to Saul. No, he didn't do that. David didn't go to his own brothers to apply humility on a referencing issue that was related to Saul. No, he didn't do that. David went to Saul to apply humility because his referencing was directly related to Saul. What does it mean for us? It means when we achieve and the references come, we must desperately seek something that humbles us, that is directly related to where our referencing is coming from. For example, if you are a pastor and that is your referencing today, seek to go and serve the very people who are giving you that reference. By doing that, you are seeking to apply humility at the source of your referencing. If you are in the workplace, as a leader in the workplace, seek to go and serve your subordinates because that is the source of your referencing, and that is where you apply humility. If you are in a marriage, in the family, and you are a husband, seek to go and apply your humility on your wife, on your children, because this is the very source of your referencing. If you are a wife, seek to go and apply your humility on your husband, on your children, because those are the sources of humility. So when references come, desperately seek something that humbles you and seek that humility at the source of your referencing. Number 2, when references come, desperately seek accountability to overcome self-sufficiency from others. If we read from 1 Samuel in chapter 18, verses 3 to 4, the Bible reads, "Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own. And Jonathan took off his robe that was on him and gave it to David, and with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt." So David has achieved by killing Goliath, and references have come upon David. So David goes then and finds a relationship where he can be accountable and vulnerable. David's accountability relationship wasn't based on whom he was most comfortable with to go into an accountability relationship. No, it was based on who was most familiar to his source of referencing, Saul. So David didn't go and build an accountability relationship with his brothers for this case. He did not go and build an accountability relationship with his shepherd friends in this case. David was led to King Saul's son, Jonathan, who was the closest relationship to the source of David's referencing. You know, we normally find accountability relationships once we have achieved and once we are being in this position of referencing. We normally go and find accountability relationships, based on who we are most comfortable with. And normally that is away from the source of referencing. But what we are saying today, brothers and sisters, is once we've achieved and referencing comes, we need to find accountability relationships that are most familiar with our source of referencing, just like Jonathan would have been most familiar with Saul, and therefore became David's accountability partner. So if you're a pastor and that is your referencing, go and find an accountability relationship with your leadership team, because they are the closest to the source of your referencing, which is the congregation. You know, a lot of us pastors are tempted to go and find accountability relationships, you know, with people in the other church, which is fine. We go and find accountability with people in our community elsewhere, which is fine. We're going to find accountability with our former classmates, which is fine. But the test of the grain is you going to find accountability with those that are most familiar with the source of your referencing. If the source of your referencing in this case is your congregation, then your leadership team is the closest to your source of referencing, and you need to build accountability with that leadership team. If you are in the workplace and you have been promoted to being a leader, we want to go and find accountability relationships with others in other organizations, with people that were friends in high school. But let me tell you, it is best to go and find accountability relationships with people that are familiar with the source of your referencing. If the source of your referencing is your subordinates, then maybe your colleagues who are at the same level with you in this organization may be best to be your accountability partners, because they are familiar with the source of your referencing. If you are in a marriage and you have your spouse and your children and your family refer to you as daddy, you know, provider, husband, your wife may be closest to the source of your referencing, and therefore build an accountability relationship with your wife. If you are a wife, your children and your family may be calling you mother of the home. They may be calling you mother of the clan. They may be calling you, the one who takes care of the needs of the home. And your husband may be closest to that source of referencing from your family, and therefore build an accountability relationship with your husband. If you're a married couple, for your own relationship, your children are closest to the source of your referencing as a married couple. Build an accountability relationship with your children as a couple, because children know when mom is loving dad. They know when dad is loving mom. They know when things are not right. They know when things are okay. Build an accountability relationship with those that are closest to the source of your referencing. Third lesson is, when referencing comes, desperately seek God's plan to avoid self-sufficiency from God. If we look later on in David's life, when he's now being pursued by King Saul, in 1 Samuel, in chapter 18, right? In chapter 24 and 26, we actually see David spares Saul's life twice, even when he had the opportunity to pin him down. And this is where we see David saying, touch not the anointed of God. But David had the opportunity to kill Saul after his achievement with Goliath and after his referencing. He gets an opportunity to kill Saul so that he could become the next king. But David says, let me restrain myself, touch not the anointed of God. You see, David had an opportunity to add to his achievements after the referencing, but he had to restrain himself in order to allow God's plan and pathway to any further achievements. You see, any achievement combined with referencing usually leads to temptation to push for more achievements. So restrain from additional achievements that are not based on God's plan. David could have looked at his achievements with Goliath and the referencing that came with it, and he could have looked to more achievements by killing King Saul and then becoming king. But he knew that achievement combined with referencing usually leads to temptation to push for more achievements even without God's blessing. So he restrains himself. So further achievements outside of God's plan can dilute your original achievement. So, for example, if you are a pastor and you are being referred to as a pastor, and that's an achievement that you have, if you push for further achievements without the blessing and the plan of God, people can actually begin to worship you as a pastor. And that dilutes the original achievement of having become a pastor in the first place. If you are in the workplace and you have been promoted as a leader, maybe you're now looking at becoming the CEO or an executive director or the chairman of the organization. And normally, because you have had the first achievement, the temptation is now let me kill and destroy others so that I can add to my earlier achievements. If you are a father and where you are, you have achieved as a father, temptations can come to push you to being a father who's a dictator because you want to achieve much more beyond God's plan. If you are a mother and you have achieved motherhood, you can be pushed and be tempted to move to become a tormentor in the home beyond the original achievement that God had for you. So the lesson is, when references come, desperately seek God's plan and restrain from any further achievements that dilute from the original achievement, and wait only for God's additional achievements. So as we conclude today, remember, every achievement of your life changes your references, and references can threaten your identity. When references come, desperately seek something that humbles you, that is related to your source of referencing. When references come, desperately seek accountability to overcome self-sufficiency, but that accountability must be closest and most familiar to your source of referencing. And lastly, when referencing comes, desperately seek God's plan to avoid self-sufficiency from God. Don't dilute your original achievements by seeking further achievements that are not with God's blessings and away from God's plans. May God richly bless you. Thank you.